Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Marius Franklin, an April board member and facilitator of the call today. Thank you for joining us for this workshop. I want to mention a few housekeeping rules and items before we get started. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up depending on what device you are on. You can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen. This is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the closed caption tab on the menu bar. For sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen if slides are shown, you can select the line in the middle to make slides larger or smaller. For sessions if you have technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find the word bubble in that same menu bar. If you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt-H. Or please use the info and help section on the conference website for more help. For Q&A times, please note the Q&A box is on the menu bar. Please only submit questions there as they may get lost in the chat. To ask a question or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar. That allows us to know you have a question. For those of you on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute. You can select the unmute option or Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. I would like to introduce our speakers today. The first person we have, depending where you're looking at on the screen, it will be to my left is Kyle Kleist. He is the executive director at the Center for Independent Living for Western Wisconsin. And then to my right, the lovely and beautiful Linda Pogue, disability rights and peer support trainer at Disability Link in Georgia.
Thank you, Arias. Appreciate the introduction. Anything else you need to say?
Oh, I also forgot to mention the name of the session we're in today. It's the introduction to peer support. And so I hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you, Arias. This is Linda. My name's Linda Pogue, and I no longer work full-time at Disability Link, which is the Center for Independent Living that serves metropolitan Atlanta in Georgia. But now I'm lucky enough to spend my time talking about peer support and disability rights. And it's a huge honor to be here with my friends from April and to be alongside Kyle. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, welcome everyone. Myself, I've been in independent living for over 12 years, currently as executive director, but peer support has always been near and dear to my heart because my first job in independent living was as a peer support coordinator. So Lynn and I are looking forward to a really great discussion today, talking about what different centers are doing for peer support, why it's important, and an opportunity to really share with one another around peer support. So with that, Linda, I will get started.
Thank you. First slide, what is peer support? What does your center do around peer support currently? So I'd love to hear from anybody in various ways that Arias said you could contact us. In the meantime, can I ask you, Kyle, please to share some of the things that happen at your CIL to start the conversation?
Absolutely, Linda. So one of the things, peer support used to be one of those positions that we actually had at one time a part-time and then a full-time person around. And, you know, over time, it kind of took a back seat as staff took on other activities and we started to do other things. So one of the things that came out of our recent 3-year strategic plan was putting more of an emphasis back into peer support. So I have 2 wonderful new staff, and the one thing that they brought a change that I'm really excited about is instead of calling it peer support, they're calling it peer partnership. Kind of putting the emphasis on the fact that, you know, it's not just mentoring, but it's a partnership between individuals as well as they share ideas and information. And also looking to do some wonderful activities. In the past, we've had some great groups that were kind of age specific. We had one that was going for was called Born in the 90s. So it was really geared toward the younger population, I guess. But yeah, up until the pandemic, which we'll talk about as well, how COVID has impacted things. But yes, at our center, we are really looking, and here's one of the things that I'm excited about today is to learn what other centers are doing around peer support. So some of the things that we can take away for our center as we move into really developing our peer support, or as we're calling it, our peer partnership program.
Thank you. So yeah, this is peer support in action. People from centers all around the country sharing with each other, care of April, this great opportunity to learn from one another. So we'd love to know whether you are primarily doing the things that you call peer support, or whatever name you give to it. We'd love to hear that too, how you're talking about it. Are you primarily doing groups? Is this a formal program where people are connected with each other? Do you think of peer support as an outcome or as a tool for other outcomes? I'd be very interested to know. And following what you were saying too, Carl, do you think that peer support is getting enough attention generally in the independent living world, or in your particular CIL, or any of those questions? We'd love to hear from you. What about training? Is training something that happens as part of your maybe orientation for staff and volunteers around peer support, or is it something that's conducted separately? That would also be of interest, I think. Another question I have is, well, can anyone do it? Can anyone do peer support? How do you answer that question in your Center for Independent Living?
Yes.
This is Abby from April. A reminder that everybody here is welcome to participate. There is a Q&A portion. We also have the chat, and you are welcome to raise your hand. And we would be happy to give you the opportunity to unmute to ask or answer any questions during today's sessions.
Thank you. Yeah, especially we'd love at this point, Linda and I were really hoping that we could hear from other folks around the country is, what is your center doing around peer support? Opportunity to really share. So I talked about, you know, our center really focusing on doing some peer partnership. We're developing some paperwork around that, specifically looking at individual matches, of course, going back to I suppose what a lot of people call the traditional peer support model, where we would match up people with the same or similar disabilities. But I see it around, things have been morphing into doing a lot more group activities and things like that.
Yes. How do you people get connected in your particular CIL? Is it around, as Kyle says, that traditional thought of people with similar disability labels or experiences, or is it around something different? Maybe around goals, maybe around something simple like geography or communication, something like that. Yeah. So I see people are saying hello, and I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you. Have you not just ask a question, but a comment on any of the things that we've mentioned so far? Anything that could come around, what does your center do around peer support currently? So I see somebody saying groups is our model so far. That's from Kendra Garcia. Thank you, Kendra.
We have a raised hand from Renata.
Go ahead, Renata.
Good morning. My name is, and I'll put it in the chat. My name is Renata Shepard, and I'm one of the transition advocates for Mounting Horizons Center for Independent Living. And we serve Galveston County in Texas. I had put in the chat a couple of things. Actually, I am the facilitator of both of our active peer support groups right now, which I love. I'm the co-facilitator. We have another staff member that does it with me. But one is for individuals with cerebral palsy, because we saw a need for that within the community with a lot of the consumers we serve. And then we have one for seniors. We call it Silver Linings. And it's really great. I love both of them, both of the support groups, but the one where we work with the seniors, and they're both in group format. The one that we work with the seniors is just so, it's very unique. It's very fulfilling just to be able to serve the seniors in this way, especially during this, post-pandemic time that we've been in, that we're in now, just because a lot of them have been housed or not have been able to get out as much as they would like. We've been doing a virtual format, which worked really well. I mean, because we've incorporated discussions and guest speakers and games and all different kinds of things to make it interactive. We are scheduled to have our first one of our new grant year in the next 2 weeks. And we're gonna try to do it in person, and hopefully it will go well. This will be the first in-person one, since COVID, just to be a kind of meet and greet. We're going to meet for lunch and have a guest speaker on Medicare, because we find that, or have found that, a lot of our consumers don't have Medicare, are in need of it, just because they're not familiar with it, and are not knowledgeable about it, but hoping that it goes well. But as our consumers request peer support needs individually, we try to accommodate those as well.
Thank you, Renata. I appreciate that. So how do you measure? It sounds like you're really enjoying the group, and that's always great. So how do you measure the success? How do you know that they are successful groups? What kind of feedback do you get from the participants?
Well, our participants are very vocal, and so we'll just ask them. We ask them for their input a lot. What discussions they would like to have, what activities or events they would like to do, and they're very vocal with just letting us know, kind of, if they're happy. We kind of got the idea because we took a break. This summer we took a month off, and we had the seniors calling going, when are we going to start up again? So they're very vocal with letting us know, and we encourage and love that, because we want to hear back from them, whether it's good or if it's bad, because it's helping us to improve either way.
And can I ask a question of you? Do you think of those groups as primarily peer support, or as a combination of peer support and independent living skills, or how do you see that fitting together?
I think it's both.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit of both, because it is peer support for them, which, you know, a lot of the, especially the seniors, they really need it. But also the other two, because oftentimes we'll have individuals that'll come in and, you know, and talk about things that, you know, that they're really, the seniors are really wanting to have more information or be knowledgeable of. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes. You bring up a wonderful point. A lot of centers have developed almost disability specific groups. At one time, our center had a chapter for the Self-Help for Hard of Hearing group that I'm sorry to say kind of dwindled over time and went away. But it was kind of like, as you said, Linda, more of independent living skills and peer support.
Thank you, Renata. That's great. I appreciate you sharing. Is anybody else interested in sharing about the stuff we've talked so far?
Linda, this is Arius. We do have a question. We do have a question in the Q&A box.
Would you like to share it for us? Yes, please.
So it's coming from Joel Austin. I hope I said that right. It says, Wyoming Independent Living has focused on changing its peer support to two more groups activities via Zoom. And now, along with coming into our centers, we have renamed all to make them more exciting and have made them more consistent and interactive. Seems more of a comment, but
No.
I'm not sure. So
That's appreciated. Thank you, Arius. Yes, I'd love to hear what the new names you're calling things to sharpen things up. That would be very interesting.
And you bring up a great point as far as hearing from those independent living centers that have predominantly rural areas like Wyoming. Linda had brought up the issue of geography, which can create problems when you're doing peer support.
Did I see another question pop up, Arius? Or comment?
not at this time. I'm not seeing any.
Okay,
All right.
well, that's fine. That's more than fine. So
All
thank you, Renata, for setting the scene, for sharing. We appreciate that very much. Lovely peer support in action there. How do we know what we're doing if we can't see it in connection with other people too? So thanks. Should we take a look at what else is going on in our slides?
Linda, we do have, so Joelle, who had sent in that Q&A, has also raised her hand. And then we have a hand raised from Samantha Nichols as well.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
okay.
lovely. Thank you. You want to help them speak with us?
Hi, this is Joelle from Wyoming Independent Living. And I just was going to say, yes, we will be talking about kind of some new names we're actually presenting on Wednesday. But about what we did, during COVID and how we kind of readjusted our peer support groups. But one of the groups we had was simply called peer support, disability peer support group. And it was across disabilities. And we've changed that now to Disability Connection. And that's made a big difference in how people actually look at it now and want to learn more about it just by the name. So
Interesting.
that's really important.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. Thank you. Yes, interesting. It makes me think that or reminds me, should I say, that lots of people are unsure what peer support means. So sometimes maybe renaming it helps people to have a clear notion. Thank you. Thank you, Joel.
Was there somebody else that had a hand raised as well?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Samantha, and I am from Tri-County Independent Living. We're an organization that serves Del Norte, Humboldt, and Trinity County in Northern California. And we have a peer support group currently. Well, I'm a youth coordinator, I should say that. I'm a youth coordinator. The person who runs our current peer support is our disability advocate. And I don't run that program, so I don't know a lot about what is going on in the meetings, but I know that they do it over Zoom, and that it's kind of a group setting. So there's multiple people that come in, and my colleague Alyssa goes to great lengths to bring them into different like center activities. For example, we're going to be bringing in peer support group members to do pumpkin carving with us for the CFILC pumpkin contest, which will be really fun. I myself am trying to set up a peer support group for youth in Del Norte County, which is the county north of Humboldt. And it's very rural. So I'm worried about the challenge of getting people to come. And also I'm excited to learn more about how peer support groups work, because I don't have a lot of experience running them. So any information that I can get today would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
Yes, thank you, Samantha. So are you thinking the group you are about to facilitate would be in person or over Zoom or a combination?
Give me 1 second.
Sorry, I muted myself again. I imagine that, so I wanted to do Zoom because we are still, since I'm going to be starting at kind of the end of the year, I'm kind of wary about, COVID and things like that. And a lot of people in our area also kind of feel that way, it seems. Most of the interactions that I have with just clients are not in person. So I think just taking sort of feedback from those experiences, I would probably put it on Zoom. But I also had an idea to do like a quarterly meeting in person, if people so choose to come. So that was sort of my vision for it.
Thank you, Samantha. I wonder if there is anybody participating in this call right now who has done something similar or who is also contemplating how to do that, that might let us know. Thank you for bringing up great questions and concerns, Samantha. Anybody else want to say anything before we move on?
We have Joelle has her hand up again, and then Kaylin Elmentrop Walton.
Lovely.
Thank you. Joelle, you had some additional comments?
Oh, I think Joel's hand just went down. I
Oh.
think it was still up from earlier.
Oh.
Kaylin.
Hey, so I actually did a youth peer support group kind of similar to what they were talking about before. And the only issue that we had running into our school districts was the privacy concern of the students getting online with us. A lot of districts around us were kind of hesitant doing that. Even though it's an after school event, they were a little cautious of it.
Thank you, Kaylin, for
No.
Kaylan. I'm sorry for
Yes, ma'am.
raising that for Samantha, who was talking in there in
Yes.
Northern California. Yes, good point. Thank you.
Mhm.
Linda and Kyle, we do have a question from Hank Bostic. It says, does anyone use volunteers to facilitate peer support for one-for-ones? Hope I
Could you
heard that right.
I didn't quite hear the end of the question. Does anybody use volunteers to facilitate groups? What was the other word?
Use volunteers to facilitate peer support for one-on-one? I hope that's the right end of the question.
So a great question. Are people always using staff when it comes to peer supporting one-on-one and for running groups, or are people using volunteers in those capacities or something else? Would be very interested to hear what you're doing and what you are making of it, what's going well or what maybe isn't going so well. That would be great. Thank you for that good question. Thanks for helping us with that, Arius. So I'm just seeing in the chat, Heather was using some staff and volunteers. Evan Shockley saying staff, volunteers and consumers as an answer to that. So a range in that small sample.
Yes.
Do you
I
want
know
to
that
talk
many times people start out as consumers and eventually will transition into being peer support volunteers.
possibly even staff?
Yes. So Linda, did you want to move on to the next question then?
Yes, I was just looking, there was a chat, a couple of other people were saying whether they were primarily using staff or sometimes using volunteers. Sounds like a range. Maybe that those answers will come up a little bit more as we talk. So yes, our next slide says, why is peer support important? And on it, we have the bullets. It's a core service. It's a way to connect persons with disabilities. So why do you think that peer support is important? Anybody feel like they will have something to share about why peer support might be considered important or not? We got some answers for our who's used there. Shayna saying we use volunteers, VR interns and staff for their peer support. So yeah, why do you think peer support is important? Anybody want to share an idea or thought?
Any administrators even want to weigh in that it's time to do that, the PPR, so we need to report those numbers. So remember, it is a core service that we need to track. Obviously, that's one of the reasons we do peer support. But beyond it just being a core service is one of the things that Linda and I were really looking to have a discussion on.
Yes. It's vital to have people who have been there, done that, and had similar experiences. I'm just reading the chat. It embraces lived experience, which is all of us in this community share. I think it's foundational, says somebody else. I think it helps people to see that they aren't alone. Having peer support can make it easier. I can't quite read. I'm not very good at keeping up with the chat at the same time as talking, apparently. So the thing that always leaps out to me personally, when I think about why is peer support important, it is because, well, you just have to look at the disability community history to think about what happens when there isn't peer support. We have a history, do we not, of people without disabilities telling those of us with disabilities what to do, how to live our lives, making every decision for us. So I know that there's various things coming in from the chat, and I'd love to know what those comments are. I don't know if you're in a position, Arius, to help us with that, because they're coming in thick and fast now, and that's wonderful. This is a group of people with something to say.
This
Yes,
is
it is.
Darius. This is Darius. I'm trying to keep up with the chat as well.
You got a
I
difficult task there.
The last, going back close to the top of the start of the conversation, it was from Maisie, says it's important because of own personal experience with the disability and relating to it. Hensel says it gives people an example to follow that shows successful people with disabilities. Jake Morris says a lot of youth feel more comfortable with people their own age, especially when they have a similar disability, which allows them to build more a genuine connection. And Andy says, hey everyone, this is Andy. I've been a chairman of my YLC Youth Leadership Committee. I've been helping my peers with learning on what is happening in their centers. And then the chat is just going on from there, just introductions. And then from Caroline Scott, it says, especially in rural communities, people with disabilities can be very isolated with peer support. people can be reminded that they're not alone. And that's the end of the chat for now.
Go.
Nice work, Arius. Thank you so very much for working so hard for us. So yes, as I say, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, I think we've had enough of other people telling us what to do. We as a community, we know we are the experts in our own lives, and it's for us to determine our world. But that's something that can be very tricky if you're living in a world that doesn't think you can. So therefore, peer support does a wonderful job of supporting us to live the life that we want to live.
Linda, we have a hand up from Samantha, and the chat is zooming. So I would be happy to read out a couple more things as well, Arius. We could take turns if you want.
Yes, I think Arius has a very difficult task. So yes, please, Abby.
Caroline says, especially in rural communities, people with disabilities can be very isolated. With peer support, people can be reminded they're not alone. Shayna says, just want to share that we have a monthly virtual peer group on Zoom called, quote, Coffee, Tea, and Me, end quote. It's important because it is beneficial for people with cross disabilities to socially connect and be free to voice their opinions on different topics. It's a social connection for everyone, especially for those who cannot travel or may have limited mobility. Caitlin says, I'm noticing many request mentors around their age with similar disabilities, and that's difficult to connect them with mentors matching those requests as well as personality traits requested. Someone from Youth Lead North Carolina says, to me, peer support is more about shared experiences, interests, or goals. I think peer support goes hand in hand with cross disability programming and the interdependence that makes the independent living movement stronger. I am the founding board chair of Youth Lead North Carolina, and we have a monthly Leading On series that is virtual, and we talk about topics that are important to young people with disabilities. Sasha says, I have peer support and it helps me a lot with things every day, and I learn new things every day with my peer support. Give me 1 second. Oh, and let me fix my spotlights, and there we go.
This is Arius. We do have a hand up by Renata Shepherd, and in the chat, Shireen Bentley says, peer support is important because it helps others to feel empowered when they hear similar experiences from those who have been where they are. Samantha Nichols says, sorry, I hit the hand up button by accident. Please carry on. But Renata Shepherd still does have a hand up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This is Renata again. I hope I don't drive you guys crazy. This is probably one of the things I'm most passionate about. Just because I wish, when I was probably younger and probably in school, that there was a cerebral palsy support group in place for me. But I just wanted to add that I wholeheartedly agree with those comments. And oftentimes, it's easier for individuals, we know our family members love us, and we know that they support us for the most part, but sometimes it's even more or just as important to speak to and to hear what other individuals are going through that have the same disability in common with you. It's easier to talk to those individuals sometimes, as opposed to talking to family members. A lot of times, you just feel more comfortable expressing things with others within the group. And so, our group members know, that whatever they share, primarily it stays within the group, because unlike family, you don't have to necessarily worry about individuals casting judgment on you or, just giving their opinions, because a lot of times these individuals, they may want our opinions and they may not. They just may want someone to listen to them and what they're going through at the time. And so I think it's one of the coolest things about it is you're not with family or friends that you talk to and interact with all the time.
Thank you. Those are wonderful comments. Everyone across the board. I love those that talked about connecting people in rural areas. For those of you, my center is located about an hour straight east of Minneapolis, but so it's a real rural service area, so connecting people. But getting on the whole point of lived experience and stuff, I mean, as a man who's used with a spinal cord injury, I'm a paraplegic, so use a manual wheelchair for over 30 years. I had the opportunity early on to have a mentor, but I've had the opportunity to share my lived experience with a number of people in peer mentoring. And people, somebody had brought up around goal specific, and a lot of it was goal specific, working with one gentleman who all he wanted to do was get hand controls for his vehicle and go through that process. Another one was looking into recreation and adaptive wheelchairs. So a lot of times it can be real goal specific as far as what peer mentoring it is. But I loved all the comments about connecting people with lived experience. It's so wonderful to hear, because for me, that really is a lot of what peer support is all about.
Yes, and some of that, thank you, Carl, and this is Linda, and some of that lived experience came hard-earned, right? It was dealing with a lot of challenges, and when we've been through something like that, we'd love to think we can be useful to somebody else, that wasn't just a futile experience for ourselves, but it was really meaningful to share with other people. And that goes back to the comments that we said earlier about peer support, or somebody said earlier, about peer support being mutually beneficial, that it's not just about supporting someone, but it's about connecting with someone in a way that can be supportive of the person who is wanting to do the supporting. They can also benefit from the relationship.
Linda and Kyle, few things. We did have a hand up, but it's gone now. And then Maria Cordova said, during the pandemic lockdown, one of our rural areas had the veteran peer support group and the TBI peer support group combine and meet virtually as a cross-disability support group. Man, that's interesting. The group members were able to expand their social circle and hear new experiences, bond over shared experiences, and help each other in new ways. And then Mary says, what a great way to build community. And that's it for the chat. I have no questions right now or no hands up.
Oh, take a quite slight breather, Arius. Thank you for being on top of all that. I just want to repeat that last comment about how do we make community, or we connect with one another, and doing that through shared experiences or shared goals and aspirations. That's beautiful. Thank you. Terrific. Anybody else want to say anything at this point?
We have a few more comments in
Oh, great.
chat. It's like once you ask a question, they start to get going. So
Yeah.
I believe it's Hensel. I hope I'm saying that right. It says peer support is great for neurodivergent people too. As an autistic person, it is far easier for me to connect with other autistic people because they understand from the inside how we navigate the world, and I don't have to suppress traits as much around that person or worry about having to educate them or justify myself. Sasha says, wow, that's amazing, Maria. And that's it for the chat right now.
Okay.
We do also now have a hand up from Amanda.
Go ahead, Amanda, if you'd like to chat.
Hi there. Yeah, I have really loved hearing everyone's opinions on that. In particular, I wanted to add that peer support isn't important because it is a core service. It is more a why is it a core service? It is important because not only do we get to interact with others that have experience similar to ours, but we learn to respect other people with similar experiences and therefore respect ourselves more. That social interaction can be great for mental and emotional health. I love that neurodivergence was brought up. I think that's so important. But normalizing and respecting your own experience, I think, is, if I were to sum it up in a really short blurb, why I think peer support is important.
Thank you, Amanda. Wonderful comment. I'm glad that you brought it back to not only as a core service, but hey, why the heck did Ed Roberts make it a core service? There's a reason for that. A wonderful explanation as well. Thank you.
Yes, terrific, Amanda.
Thank you.
Respect for oneself and each other in the community is vital, is it not, for us to move forward? Thank you very much.
Did you
Gosh.
want to move on to the next question, Linda?
I had something that was really good to say, but it came and went. So yes, let's move on. Please do. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So
Okay.
we've already hit at some of this. So what are people doing with individual, group? But wanted to ask some questions with the groups and things like that. Are people, how are you doing it? I'd love to hear from folks. Is it by Zoom? When you're doing it virtually, are you doing Facebook pages? What are some different platforms that you're using for doing virtual stuff? And then if you're doing in person too.
Yes, that would be very interesting to me, and hopefully lots of other people are a part of this. I think it says we have 75 people here chatting today, so lots of possibilities. Please share. Well, maybe I could ask you, Kyle, to help people get started. Important question that you added about tracking peer support. How do you go about that in your center?
Wonderful. So how we generally track it right now is we do have staff as well that, I mean, in many independent living centers know that they have staff track their peer support time. So using our MIS system, but also looking at when we do other events as well. So for instance, I have a staff who's really into assistive technology and adaptive gaming, which is becoming one of the cool things out there in IL right now, and even for people with disabilities. But so when she's doing an adaptive gaming event, not only is that kind of like a mentoring thing or people getting, but it's peer support too. I mean, it's bringing together people with various disabilities. So we make sure to track it that way when we're doing activities, groups, those type of things that maybe they're around independent living skills, but they also have that that peer support component to them as well.
Kyle and Linda, we have some comments in the chat, and then we also have someone with their hand up. I'll read the comments first, and then we'll go directly to Joelle, who has her hand up. So
Thank you, Arias.
Kay Land says we use Zoom for our peer support group. Sasha and Hensel are having a conversation amongst themselves about the different types of disabilities they have. Shana says, Shana or Shana, hope I'm saying it right. Zoom, we use Zoom, teleconference, and in person. Maria says, hi, Maria Cordova says, hi, hybrid and in person. Kari says in person. Heather Everson says some consumers have peer support as a goal that they would like to work on. We use GoToMeeting and Facebook Live. Renata says virtually using a lot of interactive formats will be starting in person soon in the next few weeks. Kaylan says we also use Google Classroom and Teams for our pre-ed classes. I like that, that's cool. Shannon says the latter, or Shauna, excuse me, don't kill me in the chat too hard, says the latter. And then also Joelle Austin still has her hand up. So Whenever you're ready, Joelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Arias. Joelle, are you there?
Hi, yeah, this is Joelle from Wyoming Independent Living, and I just was gonna say, we've been using Zoom throughout the pandemic, and now we're opening up to more of a hybrid. We're not going to get rid of our Zoom for our peer support groups, but are actually using OWL technology, it's called, where we can meet in each of our centers and over Zoom. So we have that accessibility open for whoever wants to meet via Zoom or via in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Joelle. I wanted to say a little bit about what's been going on at Disability Link, which, as I say, is the center that serves Metropolitan Atlanta, big city, but it's not so very far away, and it's a number of the counties that we serve who are not really very close to the center of Atlanta and are quite rural, in fact. So before the pandemic, our executive director was adding Zoom to all of our activities. So that was a lucky for us, or fortunate, that staff and consumers were somewhat understanding the use of Zoom prior to the pandemic, when obviously it has proved its worth many, many, many times over. Yes. So it sounds like people are doing a combination of things, but am I hearing people saying now we're looking to do some more in person because things have changed with regards to the pandemic? That's kind of the flavor as I understand it.
This is Arias again. I'm gonna read the chat, and then I don't know if Joelle still has her hand up because she has an additional comment or information. Well, never mind, it just went down, I'm sorry. Someone from Youth Lead North Carolina says, we do Zoom since we serve across the state. I'm interested in learning more strategies to increase engagement over Zoom. If anyone wants to share any. And that is, and then Kaylan again says, we have found success playing virtual escape rooms. I want to try that actually. The kids absolutely loved it around the holidays or different major events we have done. We have done different types of rooms. Renata is adding to the comment by saying, yes, hoping to do more in person, definitely. Amanda says, we use things like Jackbox games with our youth. Love the virtual escape room idea. And that is all we have in the chat right now. We have no questions, no hands up.
Well done, Arias.
Linda, I would like to throw it out there to all of the IL directors or coordinators or managers or whatever title you go by, but those of you that are responsible for your MIS system and you're tracking your numbers, going to that last question, how do you track? Are you having staff track their time? When it comes to really getting at the numbers, how are you doing it?
Yes, would love to hear that. One thing I'd like to reiterate, maybe reflect on some of the things that people have said that I like very much, and that is that peer support in whatever form you're doing it can really increase respect, as someone said, I forgot your name, for yourself. But I think it also has a great deal to add to cross-disability respect, understanding other parts of the disability community. And I think that's a very powerful element that's not necessarily been emphasized until now. Anybody coming in, or shall we move on to another topic? Because as soon as we do that, you know that then people will have a great number of answers for this one.
We do have some comments in the chat.
Terrific.
It says, from Kaylan, it says, yes, Google has many set up and we have found that are accessible They are accessible by screen reading technology. Jake says, we tried Zoom and found a big drop in attendance. After a couple of sessions, we were given the all clear to meet in person just a few months ago, and our attendance is starting to recover. Kaylan says, as our transition advocate uses JAWS in response to the comment earlier. Samantha says, like I said earlier, Zoom is our preferred method for many of our core services, including peer support. I think in-person is a good goal, but I personally wouldn't want to rush it. We really just want to follow the lead of our clients. And then it says, could we have a moment for people to share these games? Shauna says this, by the way, I'm sorry. Says, could we have a moment for people to share these games, i.e. Jackbox games and JAWS, etc.? Renata says, all of our participants have a goal. We take attendance and it is reflected under their goal for each meeting or activity. Shauna says moment, not movement. And that is all.
No.
No hands up, by the way, no questions. And remember to put your questions in the Q&A box as they may get lost in the chat.
Thank you, Arias.
Joel just had a comment come in the chat. In real time, it says we track by taking attendance and inputting in CIL suite. We also will set up goals for those who are interested. And that's the end of the chat for now.
Thank you. So it sounds like a lot of people are tracking it using it as a goal for consumers.
Mm-hmm. You asked a great question. Shall we move on and see what happens?
Okay. So our next question is around peer support training. So what sort of training or support do you have in building your peer support programs? How are people out there training individuals out there when it comes to peer support?
Right, so is it part of staff or volunteer orientation? Is it standalone? Is it a topic for staff meetings? Is it, do people have the opportunity for refresher trainings or something along those lines? Would love to know what your experience is, and I bet the other 103 people on the call would too.
Anybody want to raise your hand and share some comments?
Would love to hear from you.
Manisha says in the chat, we have an SSI application professionals training available for the community. Arias says to everyone, thank you for your great information and knowledge being shared. And Shayna is asking Joelle, where are you entering the peer support attendance in SIL suite?
Getting down to the nitty gritty there.
Yes.
So following some of the chat we've had so far, sounds like there's a lot of groups happening. So do group facilitators have training in facilitation and or peer support? Is that a skill that people have already had developed and are bringing with them?
Caitlin says, we do an individual orientation training / background checks with annual background checks and monthly check-ins to see how things are going.
Thank you.
Joelle says, we have an intensive facilitator training program for IL specialists. Carrie says, I have WRAP RAP or Wellness Recovery Action Plan classes. I am trained through the Copeland Center. Kaylan says, hi Shauna, we did ours under group events and had the attendees added as INR. We have also done it under community events as well.
Goes back to the question of tracking again. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
This is Arias again. We also have Patricia McGinnis. with a hand up, and then in the chat real quick before you go to Patricia, we have Kaylin responding to Shauna, says, hi, Shauna, we did ours under group events and had the attendees as INRs. We have also done it under community events as well. That's in CIL suites. And I reread it just to give you the response, just in case anyone wasn't keeping up. All right, I'll read the rest of the chat, but we'll go to Patricia, so since she had her hand up.
Yeah, I am from North Carolina, and I just recently rotated off of the Independent Living Council. And there's a lot of different groups doing it different in North Carolina, including the Independent Living Council does it a little bit different, or the Independent Living Centers in North Carolina do it a little bit different than we have something called LME MCOs that manage our mental health, developmental disabilities, TBI, and substance use services, which peer support is very big in some of those trainings. And the Department of Health and Human Services and UNC School of Social Work have partnered together and through Behavioral Health Springboard, and we have a credentialing process where people become certified. And there's also a way that you can check to see whether a peer support specialist is certified or not. And many years ago, and I just do volunteer peer support in my community, but I was in the first class in my area taking peer support. And we have a lot of peer support specialists in North Carolina, and we also have a lot that are employed, particularly in addition to what they're doing in the independent living centers in the behavioral health world. It is very big in North Carolina in that. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and appreciate the opportunity to be at this conference.
Thank you, Patricia.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patricia.
We have the chat coming in. I'm telling you, it's like once you guys start this is a great session to facilitate, by the way. Just like once you guys start with a question or a comment, the chat just goes wild. So this is Caitlin responding to Joel's question about the CIL suites reporting. It says, it said, this is Shauna asking Joel where they entered the peer support attendance in CIL suites. Caitlin responded and said, we do an individual orientation training, background checks with annual background checks and a monthly check-in to see how things are going. Then Joel came right behind that and says, we have an intensive facilitator training program for IL specialists. Kari says, I have a RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan classes. I am trained through the Copeland Center, and I'm just rereading the chat so we can kind of catch it up. Hi, Shauna, we did ours under group events and had the attendees as INRs. We also have it done under the community events as well. That's in CIL suites. Shauna says, thank you. Joel says, Shauna, we enter and track in CIL suites under the group events as well. Andy says, I just did a program on April Youth called Lead On. It helped us learn on what we can do to help our peers be more advocating for themselves. Jake Morris said, I was a member of my peer support group before I became an employee, so I already have a rapport with a lot of the members. I have received some supplemental video training, and I also have my supervisor and mentor in the Missoula office ready to give me advice if I need it. And that is the end of the chat. No hands up, no questions in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Arius. Fantastic work. Really appreciate it. So I'm specifically interested whether people have received any training, guidance, support around the very large element of peer support, and that is listening and responding with care. Is that something that strikes the chord with anybody, that kind of thought? beyond obviously building rapport and beyond respecting confidentiality and those very important elements. But are we really listening to people and responding to them? I suspect you are, because I hear the comments that you're making, but I'd be very interested if anybody had anything to say around those topics.
Yes, wonderful. Great point, Linda, because we're very fortunate to be in a college town. So when I used to do peer support trainings, I would always had a connection with one of the faculty in the mental health counseling that would come and talk about those types of things, about listening skills, responding, those types of things in our trainings. Now I wish I would have recorded it and had it for posterity, but it was a great training that was just really getting at basic listening skills for people.
Yeah, I see Kerry Roston's popped up to say a wrap. It's all about exchanging and listening.
Linda and Kyle, this is Arius. We do have a question came in from Caitlin. It says, for SEALs who have their IL specialists, advocates also providing the peer support for consumers, does your SEALs also have volunteers from the community that are trained in to be mentors, peer support, or does everyone get paid to do it?
Good question. Love to hear what other people are doing.
Wonderful question around background checks. I see that going on more and more in peer support. It wasn't something that was done back in my day when I was first hired, but I understand because, many people with disabilities are vulnerable as well. So there seems to be more of an emphasis on people doing background checks when it comes to peer support these days.
So one thing I'd like to add from the point of view of Disability Link is that we often provide peer support training for volunteers, whether they're going to specifically do something called peer support or whether they're participating in programs in another way, because of that element of peer support being through everything that we do at Centers for Independent Living. So not everybody wants to be a group facilitator, not everybody wants to necessarily participate in a program where they're matched up, but they do want to participate in activities of the center, and providing the peer support training has been helpful, I believe, along those lines. Anybody else want to say anything about training? Or anything else? Because you've all said lots of good things, I should say. Thank you.
This is Arius. Joel says we have specific peer support group facilitation training that hits on listening, empathy, and meeting people where they are at.
It's wonderful to hear that people have developed some certificate programs as well. One of the things that I always found beneficial was doing the peer support training was giving people a certificate of a type, recognition for completing the training. But one else question I wanted to just throw out is, have you ever had people that were trained and then you weren't able to use them and they lost interest? Was one of the things I found early on when I was doing peer support trainings was I would have people wanting to do peer support. I would get them trained in it. And I didn't have anybody to match them up with, which was always, and then they would lose interest.
Yes, that's a sad use of resources, isn't it?
Yes.
Anybody else got comments then about how to match up those opportunities of training and connecting people and making that have sense in real time? Love to hear that. I bet lots of other people would be interested in that one too.
Yes.
It's definitely a challenge for us. Anything else about training?
This is Arius. I don't see anything in the chat right now. No questions. Let me check and see if I don't see any hand ups as well.
Okay,
Well,
Arius, thank you.
one just came up. I apologize.
You have nothing to apologize for. You've done magnificently.
So Renata, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and speak.
Sure, I just wanted to add to the piece about when you guys asked about, are we listening, or are we listening to really hear what our participants or consumers are saying during our peer support meetings or gatherings. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but when I said that, a lot of times all these individuals want to do is just to have someone listen to them, because they don't have that. And we even, in our agenda, we incorporate a specified amount of time just for them to share in both groups, because the cerebral palsy group, is a mixture of all ages, whereas the Silver Linings, the senior group, is more of like a 55 and over age group. But they both want that. We found that both groups desperately, especially now during COVID, we learned so much from each other. And so a lot of times, even for me, I learned so much from having these peer support groups, from just, obtaining information that may be relevant to other consumers we're working with, or just doing life, just how to do life, especially with the seniors, because a lot of times they're not only sharing information that they might have obtained, but they're sharing years of wisdom a lot of times that, other individuals might not have even thought of, to help them get them through, life. So I think that's very important, that they have their time to share, or just whatever they want to do. And they appreciate that. Some of them, once they get going, especially the seniors, it's hard to stop them, which is great. So I love being a part of that, just from hearing what they have to say. And we make it a point to let them know that it's their support group. I mean, we're there as facilitators, yeah, but it's their support group. So we want them to have input. We want them to be the one talking and expressing.
That's lovely. Thank you for being so open and sharing, Renata. Yeah, I'd love to know. That reminded me about sort of any guidelines that people might use in support groups. Obviously, we've already mentioned things like confidentiality and being respectful of one another. But if there's anything else that people use in their guidelines that you'd like to share with others, I bet that would be well received too.
We have some stuff coming into the chat from Deanne Har. It says peer support can be similar life experience, not just based on age group, disability specific. And then Patricia McGinnis had her hand up, but I don't know if she put it down on accident or if she just got her question answered. Well, her hand is up now, so we'll go to her.
Thank you.
I might have jumped ahead. I could go back still.
This is Patricia or Pat. I just wanted to say I had answered we're talking about the pandemic and peer support, and I'm an older person. I had answered there was a little block in the newsletter from Disability Partners in Asheville, and something to do with UNC, and their graduate students had partnered with AARP, and they were calling older people like once a week and having like a 45-minute conversation with them, and they were getting college credits for doing it. And it was to keep seniors connected to the outside world, primarily during the pandemic, because they were telling us all not to leave the house. And that worked really well. I really enjoyed you know, a lot of young people don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking to old people, but she was an excellent person. And I think I made a friend. She was from Statesville, but she was going to school in Asheville, and Statesville's not too far from here, hour and a half or so, but maybe a little less. But it was a really good program, and it was done by telephone, which everything's gone to technology now. But for some of us older folks, you know, that may be our preferred way of communicating and actually hear a voice on the other end. So it worked really well. And I was really grateful that I had got that newsletter from Disability Partners, and that for some reason I had just taken it on myself to respond. It had a little ad, anybody interested? And a few weeks later, I got a call asking me if I would be interested. And it was really beneficial to me, I think, and maybe to her too. So it was a good thing.
Lovely. Thanks, Patricia.
We have,
Yes.
we have a question come in the Q&A box from Youth Lead North Carolina. It says, what are some of the specific topics that you cover in peer support training?
Linda, that's a question for you.
I love talking about peer support training. Thank you, Kyle. What a friend you are. So I can tell you, you know, the brief version of the training that I facilitate, and it begins with what is peer support and why is it important. That's sort of the context of peer support, thinking about how peer support was included in independent living, those kinds of topics. And then it's the majority of the training is about what kind of skills do I need to be a good peer supporter, whether that's group or individually. And specifics of those specifics is the listening and responding part, how to deal with putting your own judgment aside, some of the techniques for dealing with conflicts or differences that seem difficult, lots of role play to try that out, because it's good to just practice it in a safe environment. So lots about listening and responding, and then some training about what to do in particularly challenging situations, critical situations, and then helping people connect with resources, the community, that kind of stuff. And then about how to support each other as peer supporters, because to do it properly, it's actually quite a demand of oneself. Want to do it as best as we possibly can, and that requires some support in turn. So that's like the very brief version of the particular training that I facilitate, and I'm sure other trainings have something that's similar and little individual aspects. Kyle, what about you? What kind of training are you encouraging your staff and volunteers to have?
Well, they're just ramping back up. So they're doing the same thing, Linda. I mean, when it comes to the training, is looking at, I mean, some of the things that you just talked about, confidentiality as well. That's one of the things that, you know, I always like to stress in peer support is, you know, you have to make sure that, you know, what individuals are telling you remains confidential, because it's one of the cornerstones of peer support.
Can't build trust without it.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add in on training aspects that's useful for our other 100 folks listening in? That'd be lovely. Of course, we can always come back, no problem. The other aspect of that, Kyle, I'd like to add is I think it asks something of facilitators if groups are happening both in person and virtually. I think there's another set of skills. You need an Arius or something like that to assist you, to be useful when it comes to balancing communication, I think. Anybody else have some experiences they'd like to share about COVID?
We have Renata Shepherd with her hand up, and then we have Molly Palestrini with her hand up.
Terrific.
Even though, you know, we've had great success, I think, with doing still being able to hold our peer support meetings, virtually during the main part of the pandemic. It's just something about doing it in person. You just don't get that face to face. You get it on Zoom, but it's not the same. So even though we had great success with it, we still saw the need of individuals wanting to meet in person. Seniors, not so much. When COVID was really bad, they were really still skeptical. And so were we as a staff, for them. But now we've decided that we're gonna do a combination of both, so that we can satisfy everyone wanting to participate. And I agree with Kyle about the whole technology thing. And to your question, Kyle, about whether we'll ever go back, just my opinion, I don't think so. Because fully, just because people have seen the benefits of the whole technology aspect, and maybe the downside to it. I'm involved in a lot of other things too, and I tell you, most of those meetings that I'm attending are virtual, and so having a hard time, to commit to doing it in person fully, maybe once or twice a year. They said, we're thinking about doing some things in person, but not fully in person, because virtual is just so convenient for individuals, to keep individuals from having to travel. And especially, for the participants that may not be as mobily able to get out. It's so convenient for them. So, but definitely COVID has changed. It's helped us to have a whole different perspective on how things can be done without having to necessarily do them in person.
Thanks, Renata.
We
Appreciate that.
we have Molly Palestrini next, and then Caroline Scott has her hand up.
Lovely.
This is Molly from Disability Action Center in Lewiston, Idaho.
Hello, Molly.
We're quite rural up here, and I've been with DAC for a little over 10 years. And during the pandemic, what happened with us is we actually were able to reach more rural individuals, or more rural individuals wanted to participate. And that has carried forward because we are so spread out that it's made it nice. We also run some hybrid meetings with an OWL. So you can either come or you can be online, but everyone can participate. And that's really helped us out a lot. And
That's
all I
good to hear.
Did we have one other person that?
Yes, Caroline.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Perfect. I am Caroline with Ability Montana, formerly Montana Independent Living Project in Montana. And we found the same thing that Molly was finding, that we had so many more people who were able and wanting to participate via Zoom, via virtual connections, because there's so many different issues, reasons, barriers. One, COVID, and two, transportation and mobility, and three, we are very rural in Montana. There are a lot of people who may not want to make an hour's drive in the middle of winter to attend a peer group. So it really opened a new door to connections. And it also, we have 3 offices in different towns in Montana, and it allowed people who would have been kind of confined, that's not the right word, but would have been working with peers in their own particular community to communicate with peers in all of our communities. So it kind of broke down some geographical barriers as well. And we've had the same things where both facilitators and participants have challenges to to doing the Zoom, but we really haven't passed the point of whether or not we should do virtual meetings. I think that the question that we're trying to figure out is, how do we do it best? How do we do it better? How do we do it so that we can make it accessible for everyone who wants to participate that way and meet people where they are in a new way? I mean, it's just very different now than it was before COVID.
Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate that.
This is Arius. We have actual question in the Q&A box. It says COVID shone a light on accessibility needs for immune issues, travel difficulties, etc. Lots of new inclusion, but making sure everyone feels included virtually can be difficult. It's more difficult to discuss very personal issues. Games can be fun and easy, but we struggle to have those same goal-oriented personal groups.
Thank you. I have one answer for your question, Kyle, about, are we going back? Recognizing that there are indeed issues with virtual connections too, technical issues and personal issues. But aren't we in independent living all about helping people have choices and options in their lives? And Zoom has offered an option that was not so readily available. So despite its limitations, if you think of it that way, it is another option that we can provide our community.
Yes. And I love to hear the people from the rural centers chime in once again, because it is a way for those of us that have really rural service areas to be able to connect people. But my one concern that I have with those rural areas though is when we have individuals that have limited access to internet or broadband. And so that still is a barrier we're slowly overcoming, but otherwise, yes, it has really opened the door for us to do so much more than we ever thought possible prior to the pandemic with doing things using Zoom and other platforms. But like other people have said, especially Renata, that I am glad to be back to the hybrid. And you're right, Linda. I mean, when it comes to consumer choice, that's one of the things with having hybrid. But being able to connect with people in person once again, I find to be very refreshing. Especially being able to see their faces is always a nice thing. But for those that many times can't make it, even having the hybrid option is really still allows them to engage.
And I hope that our independent living community is using as much energy on advocacy for rural connectedness with internet, as much as we have to do that same type of advocacy with regards to transportation. Now we have more work to do.
Hi guys, this is Arius again. Just to let you know, we've reached the 5-minute warning. 5-minute warning, and then also I'll read some things in the chat. Very interesting conversation going on. Deanne says, I agree, for those of us who do not drive, virtual has opened up opportunities. And then Joelle said, we've had the same experiences in Wyoming. And this was towards the common question about being in very rural areas and how Zoom and other ways have not always been the best since COVID, if I'm not mistaken. Alliance, Brittany Zinier says, Alliance of Disability Advocates in North Carolina have been using a device called the OWL to successfully have a combination of virtual and in-person hybrid meetings. It allows the people on the virtual meeting to see and hear what the people in person see. And it says, I hope this helps. Caroline says, how do we make the virtual or Zoom feel more like in-person interactions? That would be such a great help for us. And so I think if Caroline read the chat before, I think that OWL would probably be a great accommodation as well. That's it. Thank you. 3 minutes now. I'm sorry to take up.
We do also have a hand up from Manisha.
Please go ahead, Manisha.
Oh,
There we go.
Angelina.
Hi. I am just gonna chime in on how COVID and everything has kind of affected everybody. The OWL is great, by the way. We have that in our organization, and it has been a super great tool to have. You can set it in the middle of the room, and then everybody has access to everybody. It does also have closed captioning for people who are hard of hearing or not keeping up with what's going on, and it records. They're about $1,000. So they're a great tool to have. I believe that it's created really positive effects, like having the support groups digitally and now hybrid has helped a lot of people because it does give more access. It does for like several reasons, social reasons. It removes several barriers of driving, physical mobility, mental health. There's a lot. It also created a lot of barriers because, again, mental health. It's really difficult when you can't get in to see people, and having that interaction is really important. And it's created a lot of mental health issues. I live in rural Colorado. I work for Southwest Center for Independence, and we cover 5 counties, and it's rough. The amount of mental health care here is virtually inaccessible. So having in-person interactions is a big deal, and it's basically decimated our TBI group. We have a TBI support group, and particularly for them, it has been a significant barrier to get over being digital.
Mm.
I think
Wow.
that's been really TBI specific for us.
Wow.
But yeah, I just wanted to chime in. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you so
chiming in,
much.
Manisha. Really, really appreciate your chiming in, as you call it, and everybody else. Terrific, terrific participation. Thank you for being so willing to share. Isn't peer support marvelous? When you give opportunities for people to share, they share. It's wonderful. Thank you. So our last question, what else do you want to know or talk about with regards to peer support in our last few minutes?
Really quickly, we do have a question to come in. It's from Youth Lead North Carolina. It says, can someone who has facilitated hybrid meetings share how the logistics work? Do you feel like you are facilitating 2 different meetings at the same time?
Excellent question.
Wonderful
Anybody?
question. So yeah, I could chime in. So we actually have our conference room, so we can actually set it up. Thankfully, I think a lot of independent living centers like us, we use our CARES Act funds to upgrade our technology so that we're able to have people in person, but we're also able then to have overhead projections. We can project on the screen for those that are there and those that are in Zoom. So it's really just a matter of setting up a Zoom meeting on a big screen in your conference room, and then allowing people there in person as well. The one thing though you might want to look at is having a good webcam that can, one of those that can panoramic, that can either move to the individual that's speaking or is kind of panoramic and show everybody that's there in the conference room. Just my kind of comment on the technology side, and I think we've run out of time, haven't we?
We have for this session. We did have one more question come in, which I'm going to make sure to make note of so we don't lose it, because I think it is a great question. It is from Shauna, which is in a, oh, 1 second. I was all ready to do that. There we go. Sorry, lost my place. There we go. In a peer support group setting, how would you handle a participant who changes the topic or conversation to religion and wants to share his or her faith as well as pray for the group out loud? So I've made sure to make note of that question. So if Linda and Kyle, you want to come back to it at a later point.
Thank you.
Great thing. That's a great thing we can discuss in the wrap up.
Yeah. Yes, maybe go along with our conversation back to, what sort of guidelines do we use when facilitating groups?
Yes.
How to handle challenging situations. Yeah, so we have been talking for an hour and a half about peer support, and clearly everybody has a lot more to say. So thank you for being such terrific participants, and we'll be back. In half an hour, we're back talking about volunteer programs, so an opportunity to take a break. And then later this afternoon at 4 o'clock Eastern, it's a wrap up of all the things that maybe we haven't been able to finish in this conversation, and maybe a few more things. So I don't know what else to say, but wow, that was great. I feel such a privilege to hang out with you guys virtually as it is.
I second that, Linda. Thank you so much. And thanks for all the wonderful comments and those that spoke up and really shared as well.
I think we ought to say a specific thank you to Arius and Abby, who had to work very hard because you're such a chatty group. I think that was marvelous. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. We're just getting lots of clapping emojis and thumbs up and cheering emojis.
Well, isn't that
So
nice?
thank you, everybody. We were getting some thank yous and great sessions, and thank you for the session in the chat. We will be ending this session, and there will be a new link for session number 2 for today's conference. You can find those links in the April conference website, which I will put here in the chat. I'm sure you all found it as you are all here. But as a reminder, www.april-rural.org/conference. All right, everybody, have a great break, and we will see you at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is in about 25 minutes.
Yay, terrific. Next time the chat is about organizing volunteer programs. Very interesting stuff. Thank you, everybody.